Choose one.
Okay, so coming right back into it. So we were able to make the request. We're able to then parse the response. And then now what we're going to do is a small tangent, and you'll see why we're doing this tangent at the very end. But we're going to learn more about the map and the PMAP. PMAP DFR, data frame row, functions from the per package, because this is going to allow us to iterate over multiple cities. That's the key. That's the answer. We're going to be able to iterate once we create our function, iterate across multiple cities. So these little nuances are just for you to get used to working with these functions PMAP map and PMAP DFR. Even though in the function we're only going to use PMAP DFR. So what we're going to do is I'm going to run this because this is a new day for me. That makes sense. Run above. Okay, so I have all that data. Make the request. That's good. Then I'm going to run this for cities. And now you're going to see cities, data frames. Okay, no new information. San Francisco and San Diego's information is new in terms of their latitude and their longitude. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to concatenate these two pieces of information. Oh, I'm going to round. My apologies. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to round this. So there's a lot of ways of actually doing this. But the answer key's right here. I don't know why I did that. But what I can do is utilize this mutate function. Not mutate. It's already there. Utilize mutate, rounded, latitude. Okay. And do map DBL. Okay. I'm going to map across a numerical type variable, latitude, and then I'm just going to put a comma, and this is the way the answer key shows it, right? That you do, this is an anonymous function X. We're going to do round the number, whatever the variable might be, to the first decimal place. Okay, so get our parentheses straightened out. This is why I like working out of source, because I can see the order a little bit better. So this corresponds to this one. This corresponds to that one. Okay, so this should work. Run. So before, you can see that it was 28, 77, 71. This is 387. So this is one way of doing an anonymous function. But since we're in the, facet of, learning, we could also have done it like this. And this is what I probably would have done in the other video that you've seen. So this is going to be just a dot. And so it does the same exact thing. What originally that's a newer way of actually running anonymous functions, so that you can explicitly state what the variable is. When you do the period, is not as explicit. So there's many ways of doing the same thing. Again, the utility for us to actually understand this component of using the map function. Okay, using our map DPL more specifically. So PMAP, we're going to iterate the same thing, but this time we're going to iterate over a vector. Over a data frame, okay, over the entire data frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate two columns, the latitude and longitude, into one variable. So let's go ahead and do this. So what the function is called is PMAP DFR, PMAP DFR, okay, and I don't know why I need that there. Okay, the first argument is the cities. Okay, and then this is the anonymous function. So I'm utilizing variables city, latitude, and longitude. Okay, and the data frame I'm going to give to it, or at least what I'm going to do with the variables, is first set city name. So there's nothing really crazy there. All right, so just city. And then from there, I'm going to specify the latitude, and then longitude. So now I have that specified in this new data frame. Again, I know this might seem like pointless, and to me, when I was reading and processing this process of doing this, is that it is kind of illustrations, but I still want you all to see how this actual function in PMAP DFR is actually working, and that's taking our information and concatenating it into one string here, location as text. Okay, and so that I can iterate over a data frame. That's the key key takeaway. So what's the key difference between map DBL and PMAP DFR? Would be first map DBL repeats a function over one input vector or variable or column, right? And returns a numeric vector, okay? Whereas PMAP DFR allows us to repeat a function over multiple input columns and row binds. That's the big thing that I didn't mention. Row binds that returned data frames into one. So what's important, because I want to use this capacity, this function, to be able to get the information from each city's dates and then bind them all into one data frame. Okay, that's what we're going to do. And so you need to be familiar with this function, right, to be able to do this. But then you also have to understand the basics of this function map DBL to actually understand this. Okay, so with that being said, I think it's nice for us to actually go through the steps, right, in order for us to actually create this function called get weather. Okay, so one of the very first things that we need to do in order for us to get this data, or at least this function, is to define the weather function, okay, and its parameters. So in the back of your mind, you might say, what are the parameters? The parameters are city name, longe, and lat. So we need to define those three things in our function. We need to then build the API request, and that has two elements to it, but we'll see in a moment. And then from there, we need to check the response. Check, C for check, response. Okay. D, we need to then parse JSON response, which we did up there. Parse JSON response. Second to last thing we got to do is to clean the daily. Once we have our data parsed, we need to clean it. Clean the daily data. And then finally, we need a map over the cities. Okay, and then we should be done. All right, so as you already seen, I've done most of the skeleton for us, right? We're just gonna add in a few more details. All right, so first, as you can see in A, we legitimately are creating the function, right? And defining its parameters as such, okay? As defined by the function's parameters, city name, longitude, and latitude, okay? And then we need to then build the API request. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a copy and paste from what we already did before. So specify the URL, go up here to our original URL, and that's this. I could have said base URL, whatever. So go back down to this URL, and then say URL here, right? Because that's what we're going to take, URL. And then it's going to be the same information as before, right? So latitude, it's going to be latitude, longitude, and the variables that we specified earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and do copy. Whatever the user puts, we're going to put here. Whatever the user puts, we're going to put here. I have to scroll up twice. So then from there, I'm going to get these three pieces of information, which are our daily variables, and store it in our vector. All right. we can do a little bit of a tab, right? And then get our temperature unit, precipitation unit, zone, past days, forecast days, and multi. So we can get all that same information from our very first call right here. The constant information. And then once we do this, we're pretty good. I'm going to put another tab on this, just looking at a line. Okay. I think that should work. And then once we get our response, what function should we use? We should perform the actual URL, the request. So this function is going to be rec perform, and then that's our API request. We're going to check the response, and I believe I sometimes forget the function. It's response check status. Response check status. Okay, so we've got the URL. We've made our response. We then requested our information, and then we stored it in a response. We're checking the then status. Now we're going to do some parsing. Okay, parse. And then what we're going to do here is, remember, our function to parse is going to be response body to string. And then what we want from it is the daily. We want daily from it, from that actual list, daily. All right. And then once we have the daily, let's clean up the data a little bit. So dates is no longer, I think it's originally time, right? From the previous videos, I think video number 2. And then we're going to store this as YMD, or at least we'll utilize the YMD function to turn this into a year, month, dates information. And then we're going to return this daily weather data frame as our data frame. Okay. And then last but not least, we can finally do the PMAP. We did everything right here. PMAP DFR. Okay. PMAP DFR. All right. So once we run this, we will now see if it works. Let's see. So I run it and I got an error. Okay. Daily weather DF does not exist. Get weather. Okay, so I found the error, which is good. So when I first ran it, there was a space here. That was embarrassing. I'm gonna run it again so we can see the error again. So you run it, it says that data frame weather is not found, and come to find out there was a space here. So once I run this, I now have all my cities in one data frame. It says 93 rows because it's collecting today's data as well, which was cool. In the past 30 days. So that's that. That's why it's 93. That was fun. There's more questions. I'm gonna remove this from your notes, because it's just to make the video a little bit too long. But let's just answer, at least let's talk about, what exactly happened. Okay, so essentially we request the build, but what more specifically, we build and sent an API request. Built and sent an API request here in section B. Okay, utilizing the parameters in that, yes, but that's what we built and sent an API request. Okay. And then from there, what we did was we stopped early. At least we didn't necessarily stop, but it would have stopped if it didn't work. If it was a fail, we stopped, created a check. Created check to see if request was successful. Sorry. And then from there, we extracted a daily weather from JSON format. JSON extraction to get daily weather. And then we perform data frame cleaning, and let's do one more. Stored all information into one data frame. That was long. I would admit that was a little bit long, but at the same time, we really gained, a lot of different skills. Not only just building a function and the utility, the purpose for building the function, but the capacity to concatenate, bind rows into one data frame, and the capacity to then, or initially, to make our API request. So finally, we're going to do transformations and visualizations in the next video. Thank you for your time.